our sewer commission owns an easement through my property, and about a foot under the ground in those woods is the main trunk sewer line going to our sewer treatment
What, are you
plant.
worried the tree falling and breaking it?
I'm pretty sure it would. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's we got to try that. Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. I'm joined by Associate Editor Matt Milham.
Hello.
And Rob Wadsack, Digital Brand Manager.
Hi there.
Please email us your questions at fhbpodcast@taunton.com. You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. How you guys doing today?
Not bad.
Doing good.
Yeah.
How about you?
I'm all right.
Yeah.
I'm excited. We got some really good questions today.
I know.
But first, let's go to the feedback mailbag. So you guys remember from episode 145 where we discussed saving a leaky roof for the short term.
Yeah.
And the suggestion was that we gave?
I think
I was going for the metal roofing all the way.
You going for metal roofing? Mm-hmm. What'd you say, Matt?
Yeah. I don't remember what I said, but I think we ultimately came down somewhere on roll roofing, but with the caveat that you really can't put that over existing shingles. It's
right.
Definitely not 2 layers of existing shingles.
So I think our advice was to tear the roof off and bite the bullet. And so what did they do? You want to guess what they did?
Oh, I know what they did.
No. What did they do?
So they put the roll roofing right over the shingles. We have a picture of that. Let's see.
We do?
Yeah, we do.
Somewhere.
But anyway,
So it looks like
I
a
gotta
big
say,
squishy blanket.
it didn't look that bad.
Yeah. Will it last 10 years, you think?
I don't know. Let's examine that. What do you think?
I mean, I don't like the idea of putting it over the existing shingles, especially if you had some potentially damaged sheathing, which it sounded like was part of the problem. You had some punkiness going on.
Crunchy stuff. Plus
Yeah.
that stuff just, it's not really self-supporting. You know, you need a good flat surface under that stuff.
I gotta say,
Yeah.
I was very skeptical when I looked at it. It looks a lot like a lot of the homes near where I grew up.
I was gonna
honestly,
say, it looks like a quintessential Vermont home now.
well, so I grew up in Appalachia, but so that I mean, folks just don't have a lot of money, and the houses just aren't worth a lot. So if you can get a few years out of your roof,
Yeah, I've got
why
a
not?
lot of family in the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont, and a lot of them live in houses that look
a lot
not
like
as
this.
good as this.
Yeah. So
Sure, and I mean, that's the thing is that, you know, we're trying to give the advice for the best possible solution, and you know that there's just, for every person who's doing that best possible solution, there's 10 other people doing just what they need to do to get by.
Through. Yeah.
You know?
So we heard from Diami Plotke, who's a roofing contractor on Long Island. They mostly do commercial projects, but they do some residential. And he wanted to weigh in on this, and we're always glad to hear from our pro listeners, especially. First, to address the roll roofing, don't even entertain it, is what Diami says. As one of you stated, even over the best substrate, roll roofing does not last very long. The 2 options I would recommend would be either a complete rip followed by new architectural shingles, or go over with a face-fastened metal roofing panel, which is what you described, right, Rob?
Yep.
Yeah. So Diami suggests architectural rather than 3 tabs because due to their popularity, architectural shingles are basically the same price as 3 tabs while coming in a greater variety of colors, and they're easier to install, which I think we also said. Regarding metal roof options, you should expect that after a few months, you may want to go back up on the roof and check the fasteners, as the double layer of crumbling asphalt is less than stable, and the fasteners, which were snugged down during initial installation, may no longer be tight after some time has passed.
They may not even have held in that sheathing.
Yeah, that seems reasonable. Now, I just want to mention Diami. We were talking to him when he was working on an article for us, and he works a lot on brownstones, the old infill, the old apartment buildings in New York City, where the only way to get to the roof to do a repair or a re-roof is through a tiny little hatch inside of one of the closets, typically in the house. And so roofers have to bag up whatever they tear off the roof and carry it down through the house because
three or four levels through the house.
because they're not allowed, because of either the cost or restrictions of putting dumpsters on the street or chutes down the front, especially in some of these historic neighborhoods. And he said, so typically roofers will just go right over it because they're not going to deal with tearing all that stuff down. And when he goes to work on those houses, he does core samples of the roofs, and he says sometimes he'll find 10 layers of asphalt on top of one of these old flat roofs.
What do you think that costs to get replaced in Manhattan?
I don't even know. Well, I have worked a bit in New York City, and when I was younger, I was like, oh, why? Who would ever bother to work in there? But what you realize, you just need to charge for those extra detail. You have to write in the cost of the parking tickets you're going to get.
Yeah.
All those things just have to be included in the cost of the job.
I've heard contractors describe that they have an employee whose sole job is to just move trucks around throughout the day so they don't get parking tickets. That's just what they move the truck and sit in it, and then move it somewhere else and sit in it.
Yeah, it's a different world than rural Connecticut.
We happen to be in the garment district, which includes a lumberyard for serving Manhattan, and boy, was that a busy place. I don't even they were trying to load trucks on these tiny streets with forklifts, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. Hard work.
But there is an all-night hardware store in the middle of Midtown Manhattan that I went to once
because you might need a mousetrap at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
A rat trap. So I wanted to share with you guys a very self-satisfying little project I did on Saturday, and I replaced all the lock sets and deadbolts in all of my doors. So now I have one key that opens and unlocks all of the doors in my house.
It's a nice thing.
It is so
Great thing to have.
Wonderful. I've been talking about this for years, literally, and I've had actually the hardware for months. And the weather was pretty decent, and I needed a small project, so I spent a couple hours doing that, and boy, was that satisfying.
Yep. You didn't go for the Wi-Fi enabled lock systems?
I have no confidence in that stuff. I really do not.
I don't know.
We tried one of those keyless locks on the project house for a while, and I swear it was way more trouble than it was helpful.
I'm sure there are better ones than others out there. I don't know. We'll have to test it out. See what happens.
This brand started with Quickset, and I would not use that if. But the idea is you punch in the code on a keypad and it unlocks the bolt. But I found that there's not enough horsepower to pull the bolt shut on all but the most perfect fitting doors. And when the battery goes dead, you're really out of luck because you have to carry a key anyway. So I don't get it.
Yeah, you need that Amazon one though.
What's that?
They don't tell you of a thing. They can unlock your door and put stuff in your house when you're not there.
I've seen the guys who deliver for Amazon in my neighborhood, and I would not want them coming in, I gotta say.
Well, it comes with a camera, so you can watch them when they put the stuff down and
Well, you can watch them
through your
take
drawers.
Drop off your
stuff
bale
out
of
of your
adult
house.
diapers. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway,
What have you guys been doing?
Oh,
Is your roof all
I'm
done?
not doing anything fun.
my roof is done, and
They came back in the snow?
They came back in the snow. They made a little bit of a mess, damaged one of the gutters, and they actually came back and put all new gutters on one side of my house. It looks beautiful.
Nice.
I know. Yeah.
Is there any chance they messed up the other side?
No, the other side looked pretty good.
Okay.
And then I'm getting the solar hopefully installed on Friday. So
They'll do that all in one day?
Well, no, they'll start on Friday and finish next week sometime.
Cool.
Yep. Exciting.
What's the process once you have the panels and the wiring done? Does the utility come right away to hook it up, or do they inspect it, or what's the deal there?
So I actually just emailed them to sort of try to get an outline of that process because my neighbor went through it a couple of months ago, and I know there's definitely a delay between when they put the panels up and when you actually get your meter up and running. And I'll have to update.
I'm sure they're going to be in a huge hurry to connect you to the grid so you're buying less power.
Oh yeah.
How about you, Matt? What have you been doing?
Getting a little closer to moving into that bedroom.
Nice.
Worked on that closet a little bit. Yeah, it's pretty much almost done. Still got to do a couple coats of poly on some things.
On the cabinets?
Yeah, I got a couple on the cabinet that was in the picture a couple episodes ago. Mm-hmm. And then I did some more stuff on the other side of the closet, and I got to doll that up a little bit. But yeah, it's pretty much ready to move in there. Now I just got to finish up the drywall. I took your advice. I got some setting type compound and tried to fill in the wall is just so wonky. Like where the closet, there were two walls that actually came into this other wall that, sort of like teed into it.
We should tell folks what setting type compound is. So this is a compound that comes as a powder. You mix water with it, and it sets chemically instead of drying. So if you have a big fill or a lot of area, or if you're trying to work quickly, it is wonderful for that. One downside is a little tougher to sand.
Yeah. And I got to a little bit of sanding, but I'm still trying to just pack out that weird area. Like it's hard to describe. It's just a mess. And I'm not the best drywaller in the world.
Who is? That's a skill I've been working at for decades and still feel like I'm just scratching the surface.
Yeah. I need Myron over at my house.
Yeah, he's a whiz with that trowel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He probably wouldn't even bat an eye. He's probably seen worse.
I'm sure. That's a craft, I got to say.
Yeah, when you watch Myron Ferguson work with a trowel, and you ask, how did you do that? He doesn't know because it's just sort of second nature for him. He can't explain how he's just delicately waving that.
Have you guys ever seen folks use automatic taping tools?
No.
Just in videos.
So this is equipment, and it either rolls tape and dispenses compound at the same time, or it dispenses compound in a long strip. And boy, if you've seen anyone who's proficient with that stuff, it is jaw-droppingly efficient.
Yeah. Actually, I did see Myron do that at JLC a couple of years ago.
I've always wanted a bazooka. Cool. So that's what they call these automatic tapers, and it's kind of shaped like a bazooka, so that's why they call it. So you load it with compound, and it's got a roll of tape on it, and you roll it along the seam, and it dispenses this stuff automatically. Super cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I just want to leave and show up and have the tape on the walls.
I get that too.
Somebody else do it for me.
I get that too.
I can put a mediocre paint job on it myself.
That's right. I find flat paint is really a good way to make bad drywall look a lot better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That and texture.
Texture. All right, so we heard from a number of folks this week, and number one is Eric Turner from Asheville, North Carolina. You guys ever been to Asheville?
I don't think so.
Never been up into the hills there. I hear it's nice.
Oh, so beautiful. I'm blessed I get to travel a lot for my job, and Asheville is one of the places I could really see myself living. It is absolutely beautiful in the mountains of North Carolina, temperate climate, beautiful scenery, lovely place.
I hear there are a lot of creative people living out there. Right?
Yes, and it's a booming, and it's also a hotbed of brewing. A couple big breweries have facilities there.
Yeah, hipster haven, I imagine.
Oh, I can't wait. I'm ready. Eric writes, I own a 120-year-old farmhouse in farm country outside of Asheville, North Carolina that has had a few additions over the years. The oldest areas of the house do not have any insulation in the walls at all. You can feel the wind across the entire front of the house. We're removing the original beat-up beadboard and putting up nickel gap shiplap in its place. So I figured this would be a good opportunity to insulate. The walls are true 2x4 studs, full inches thick. The exterior sheathing, he puts in quotes sheathing, is the original board-and-batten running vertically, approximately 10 inches wide with 1-inch thick boards with a significant gap between each of them. Then there are layers of asphalt siding followed by aluminum siding. Question 1. Even though the gaps between the boards are covered by wood strips on the exterior, should I fill those gaps with an expanding foam like Great Stuff? I suspect the gaps are where most of the wind is getting through. All right, so we take that first one.
So from the photo, it looks like he's already gotten started on that.
He did. He says, and I don't know if it was in this email or a subsequent one, that he started doing this and then wondered if it was a good idea.
Now, I don't think it's a bad idea necessarily. I mean, the fact that there are battens on the other side is helpful. Don't know if the Great Stuff foam is the perfect material for the job, because the one thing is with those he's got basically big wide planks on the whole front of his house.
And in the summer, those boards are going to swell in this climate.
And that's one of the biggest concerns with using that sort of material as air sealing, is that if there's a lot of movement in the wood, that it could eventually open up.
Yeah, will it actually seal it long term?
So I know some of the foams that are out now are claimed to be stickier and stretchier. I don't really know a whole lot about it, but you might consider a flexible caulk, but that's an awful lot of cracks to be caulking.
You could also use an air sealing tape, but that's very expensive.
Do you know Is there any product still around? I know Owens Corning had a while back some sort of spray air sealing thing. It was made mostly for people who were doing the sort of flash and bat that didn't want to add spray foam.
Yeah, so Owens Corning and Knauf both have like liquid caulking systems meant to be used with fiberglass bats, and I think that's a pretty good suggestion. I would also want to try. Dow has been making a foam product for airtight drywall approach. It's meant to go on the face of the studs. You let it harden, and then when you put the panels on, it creates this gasket. And the idea with this stuff is it's meant to be more elastic than most spray foams. So that might be a good application for this, but that's kind of an off-label recommendation. I don't know what Dow would say about that.
Now, I was poking around on Green Building Advisors forum and found somebody talking about insulating an old house that didn't have sheathing, sort of similar situation, a leaky exterior wall, and they were tearing off the interior, similar to this. And, a lot of people actually recommended dense pack cellulose. And now if he's putting board paneling on the inside, you'd think, oh, well, then he's got to drill some holes in the boards. But what a lot of people recommend, and what you see a lot in Europe, is interior air barriers. Whether you do it out of something like OSB and
But what
tape the
about wetting
seams.
from the gaps in the boards, soaking that cellulose?
To tell you the truth, as long as the flashing details were good on the outside, nobody seemed to be that worried about it. And we're talking about some of the top people that seem to respond to those questions.
Well, those top people I got an issue with because this house has board and batten siding, which means there's no lapping to stop water, to control water, right? And especially at the tops of windows, my guess is that these boards are rotten.
Yeah.
Except that he's got like other layers of siding over the board and batten, it sounds like.
I think that's going to be an interesting component of this particular stack up.
Yeah.
So he's got this asphalt siding. And once again, where I grew up, this was a kind of a popular thing.
Sometimes
it's
it
like a
looked like bricks.
fiberboard with asphalt layer and then like granules like that would be on roofing shingles, right? And they either meant to look like stone or brick. It's never convincing.
Yeah.
It looks like Enso brick. And then they have aluminum siding on this thing, which is water shedding, right?
Sure. So, I mean, obviously, you want to be sure that you have some flashing details in place if you're going to have cellulose inside your walls. But regardless of what insulation they use in the walls, an interior air barrier might not be a bad idea.
Under his nickel gap paneling.
Yeah, there's one product that some people are recommending. There's that company, I think based in Brooklyn, 475, that provides a lot of air sealing materials, a lot of building science, high performance building materials. And there's this material called Intello Plus, which it's basically a fabric of some sort, almost like a house wrap, but that they use for interior air barriers and as a substrate to blow cellulose insulation through. So that's something to consider. Because, a lot of people put up, like you see those old cathedral ceilings that people do in cabins where they do the boards and they just skip the drywall altogether.
Bad idea.
And they've got no air barrier, and then in the winter it basically rains from
yes, because the warm,
ceilings.
moist air from the inside is condensing up on the sheathing or the framing members up in the ceiling and then dripping down.
Yeah, so I mean, if he's got leaky exterior wall surfaces, putting just the nickel gapped boards on the inside is certainly not going to be a good enough air barrier.
I'm going to make another suggestion here, too. And I don't think the foam is necessarily a bad idea. I agree with Rob that expansion and contraction over time could make it fail. But on the interior of the board sheathing, I think I would put a layer of 30-pound felt stapled to the sides of the studs and the bottom plate and the top plate to kind of make a 5-sided box, and that would keep the water from coming into the insulation cavity. It's going to help with the air barrier consideration. And then, I think it's a bad practice to put board siding on the interior of a heated or conditioned space.
As the only surface.
I think we need something. Rob suggests one of these air barriers. Or European air barrier, we call them generically.
Yep. I think they're made in Germany. But, a lot of times, I know that some of the folks at the Passive House Institute US did a bunch of houses where I think they literally just did OSB taped
Yep, I think that would work great.
Yep.
Thermoply is another option, which is a very thin cardboard material with kind of a shiny surface that's meant to be an air barrier that's commonly used behind shower units and that kind of stuff. That's inexpensive, but any of these things you have to tape and detail so that air is not getting from the inside to the outside, I think is the key.
Yeah.
Yep.
What would you do?
I'd take the siding off and I'd put rigid foam on the outside and I'd tape all those seams.
You know, I asked Eric in a subsequent email if he was planning to reside in the near future or wherever, and that would definitely, I didn't hear back from him, that would definitely affect what I would tell him to do.
Yeah, and also just knowing how big of a part of this house we're talking about. I mean, if it's a small wing of the house, the extra labor involved in tearing that board off and putting it back on or putting something else back on might just be worth it.
His next question, how should I fill the wall cavity? Since insulation in the big box doors are made for either 2x4 or 2x6 dimensional lumber and mine are in between, should I go with foam, 1/2 inches of foam followed by standard 2x4 insulation, or should I just use 2x6 insulation or just 2x4? I would say use 2x6 insulation. You're not going to get the R21 R value that's on the package, but a chart I looked at, and that'll be on the podcast page for this episode. I think you get a R19 or R16 with an R21 bat and a 4-inch cavity.
Yeah, you're going to lose. I mean, if you're only compressing something about an inch like that, you're going to lose maybe a couple of R value. But like you said, it's better. If you put too thin a layer in there, you're not going to have the stated R value of that either, and it's going to perform much worse. So there's no harm in compressing fiberglass bats.
To a point, right? You don't want it to affect how your drywall goes on or what have you, right?
Sure.
It needs to be a reasonable amount. But yeah, 2x6 and a 4-inch cavity, not a problem at all. He asked, are there any moisture airflow issues that I should look out for when insulating a wall this old? Yeah, you got to keep the water out, and you got to have an air barrier on one side or the other, and both is best. So, Eric, let us know how things go there. I hope you're enjoying your home in Asheville. Maybe we'll be neighbors someday. All right. Do you want to read the next one, Matt?
Sure. Is this Nate?
Yeah, Nate.
All right. Hey guys, my wife and I love old houses. Our first home was a single-story 1915 Craftsman that had already been renovated. We are looking at selling that home and purchasing what appears to be a late 1800s two-story. I'm confident, maybe overly confident, in my renovation abilities, but would like your advice. What should I look for when purchasing an old house? The trim profiles are really shallow, so I'm assuming that the plaster was covered with drywall at some point. The floors aren't level, and in one location, the floor drops about 1.5 to 2 inches over about 3 feet.
That is a lot.
Yeah. It's called a bathtub. There is some rot below a toilet that I can see in the crawl space, but it's not so much that it's visible, or not so much the visible things that scare me. Any advice that you have on purchasing an old house would be greatly appreciated. And then he sent some pictures.
Yeah, let's have a look.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't really see water damage under that toilet from above.
I mean, the pictures he sent,
That looks pretty raunchy.
In the basement, you're going to find some punky stuff sometimes. But overall, the pictures of this house look pretty nice. I mean, but of course, we're only seeing a little tiny bit of the house. We're not seeing.
There's
the whole
nothing
thing.
going on good there, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
So that is where an eave butts up against the main part of the house. It looks like an L or some kind of addition, and there's no kick-out flashing. That's probably a detail we should put on the webpage for the show. And the idea is to get the water that's coming down the roof to away from the main building.
Mm-hmm.
But now his question was, where should he be looking at the things that he can't see so well? And we actually have a video series. John Ross, who used to be an editor here, had a guy come. It was George Nash, who's a local restoration specialist, and did a whole video series that's on Fine Homebuilding. I'll put a link to it in the podcast notes on inspecting old homes. And a couple of the takeaways from the video series were basically, I mean, roof and your foundation are the most important things.
Yeah,
You know,
I always go to the basement first. That's where the expensive stuff is, right?
Yeah, I mean, you look for moisture issues, look for crumbling stone foundation, look at the walls and look at all the surfaces and see if there's anything that just looks really out of whack, out of
And
plumb.
I would look at the heating and plumbing systems too, because that's going to be thousands of dollars if they go south.
Sure, and if a house is that old, I'm sure it has just bits and pieces of every era of electrical wiring.
Yes,
that
also
there
an
is.
issue.
So try to find out if all the knob and tubes been removed and replaced. But also, I was poking around online and found there's a Historic Building Inspectors Association, and they have listings for people in not every state in the country, but people who specialize in inspecting old homes. And then there's another, if you can't find somebody there's another website I found called preservationdirectory.com, and they will give you, they have lists of links of contact information, not just for specialists, but for your local or regional preservation societies. And, if it's an old home in an area where there are other old homes, there's going to be people that know how those houses are built in that region, and it's probably best to go to a local expert.
Should we address his question built into his bigger question? The trim profiles are really shallow, so I'm assuming that the plaster was covered with drywall at some point. That's a technique I've seen a lot, quarter-inch drywall over existing plaster walls to cover problems or cover holes made from blowing in insulation. It's a shame to have the trim so shallow.
But sometimes in some older homes in certain regions, you will find that they actually trim out all of the openings and then they plaster
to them. Yeah.
So you can't just assume that it's drywall under there. You got to do a little poking around and try to find out, because
a good thing to do is to pull off a light switch cover, and then you might be able to see what the wall, how it's built.
Yeah, scribing to plaster
Yeah.
is a really dumb way to do it.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to put the trim up first and then plaster to that.
I would say as far as buying old houses, I haven't bought anything nearly this old, but, you just got to expect problems, and I'd put some money aside for inevitable things that are going to be wrong with it.
Assume you're going to be cold. I mean, they're almost always under-insulated. Because,
Sure.
I mean, in a house of this era, I mean, if it is plastered, then there's not much cavity to begin with, and there's plaster that's sort of like seeped behind all of that lath. When they were putting it on. So there's not probably a full 4 inches, like this other guy had, to dump whatever they did dump in there at whatever point, and you don't know what it is. If you can find somebody with a thermal camera, go in there when it's cold and just see like what the cold spots are, how, maybe it's the whole wall, maybe it's, if they put cellulose in there, maybe like the top 2 feet of every wall is just completely empty and freezing cold now.
If you're really lucky, you'll find one of those old houses in a region where they've actually filled between the timbers with brick before they plaster over their walls. I guess that was to be technique. A thermal mass or something. Do we know exactly what?
I don't know. Thermal
there?
mass probably was the idea there, but I've seen it too, and I don't know what it was.
I don't know what that's about either.
Well, I saw a picture where I think like a sill had sort of rotted out, and all of the bricks just fell out of this wall. They were on the ground.
I was called to a project in Vermont when I was living there. A local builder, he knew what I did for a living, so he called me to show me that this entire part of the structure had been built with stacked slab wood, just layer after layer, like stacked from the plate to the rafters, solid walls, solid wood.
The original Legos, pretty much.
I was never seen anything like this. I can only assume that there was a sawmill or something around, and they were just using up the wood they had.
Yeah.
Sure. And on that note, a good friend of mine works in historic preservation down in the Delaware River area in New Jersey, and he was helping work on a project once. It was a commercial, maybe 2-story building in a cute little downtown right on the river. And this building had been built by laying down the sill beams all the way around and then taking, I think they were something like 2-inch thick planks and just nailing them up as the outside wall. They were just nailed to the side of these beams, and they made
the sheathing
structure.
Was the structure too.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and to complicate things even more, there was a an old stream running underneath the foundation of the building, which had caused some of it to move. And
That sounds like a train wreck.
yeah.
So Larry Hahn in the pages of Fine Homebuilding actually built a shed with that construction method using boards as structure and sheathing. So
Yeah,
we should put a link to that up if anyone's curious what that's about. It seems to be a regional practice.
Well, Larry Hahn, he grew up. He basically lived through the history of home building in his whole life. He first lived in a sod house.
Yeah, in a soddy.
out in the plains.
Isn't that what you call him?
Yeah, and then
Am I making that up?
I don't know.
You're looking at me funny.
I have no idea. That's someone from the Middle East, as far as I know.
no, back in the Dust Bowl. He lived through all that stuff.
Yeah, he talked about like in the spring, the bugs coming out of the grass. Oh, that'd be horrible. I would lose my mind. Could you live in a sod house?
I think so.
Yeah?
Yeah.
You
like
live in
all
Afghanistan,
Yeah,
so.
I like all that kind of weird stuff. I actually went to one of Laura Ingalls Wilder's houses. Actually, I went to a bunch of them when I was a kid. We were going across, or at least the places where they used to be, and one of them was a hole in the ground that has since collapsed. But, I mean, I remember reading the books as a kid and just being like, man, that must have been fun. And then getting there and seeing how small of a hole it must have been, and to have that whole family in there would have been really cramped.
You'd
but
be freezing.
a great little fort for a kid.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. See, I think I would jump ahead a couple of steps in the history of American home building, and maybe to like a simple farmhouse, not a
Yeah. Not a hole in the ground.
hole in the ground.
Like
yeah.
a hobbit.
So you visited more than one of her?
I think there was that, and then I think they had another house that was nearby that I don't think it was there anymore. There was like the schoolhouse, I think, that she went to. I went to that. I don't know. A couple things.
Times were tough then.
Yeah.
When people say like, they don't build them like they used to, I would say that's probably good.
Gosh. Yeah.
All right. This is a good question here. This is sure to get some feedback. Eric Brown, he lives in Zone 4. Do you guys know where that is?
It's a little warmer than where we are.
So I looked it up. This is my favorite table, one of them in the IRC, International Residential Code. Table N1102.1.2 requires R49 in Zone 4, which includes Kansas, Missouri, Southern Illinois, Southern Indiana, Kentucky, Virginia, New Jersey, Delaware, parts of West Virginia, Long Island, New York even. So
That's for the roof assembly?
yeah, 49 in the roof.
They've really bumped that up over the years, haven't they?
Yeah. What was it when you started in the business, Rob?
It was in the 30s, I believe.
R30 was when I started. And slope ceilings only had to be R19.
Yeah. Well, what is it? Joe Stiebrick of Building Science Corporation. He had like a whole little progression. It was like 5 for the slab, 10 for the. No. I don't know. There's a bunch of numbers, and it ends up with being like 50 in the roof.
In the roof.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a pretty good roof to begin with. So here's the question. If you're building a new home in Zone 4, what would your ideal roof assembly look like? If the idea were to route the HVAC system through the attic, I don't like the look of mini splits, he says, and so you wanted the attic to be in a conditioned envelope, what's the best way of insulating the roof and preventing worry about insulation, water, and roof sheathing drying appropriately? So he wants to put the HVAC system in the attic. What's the only solution, gentlemen?
Got to condition that
Yeah.
space.
You got to be above the equipment, right?
Yeah.
So what do you think we do?
But the idea of insulating at the roof, it's just, I don't know, that unless it's a finished space, it just seems like a lot of effort and money for what
I
you
totally agree. But if you want to put the HVAC equipment in the attic, that's the only solution. You either have to insulate on the underside of the roof deck with foam. Closed cell is way more safe than open cell, which can lead to moisture issues on the sheathing. The other way is to go on top of the sheathing and insulate on top. And
Yeah.
I think that's what I would do.
Yeah. Well, you could also, he could do maybe 4 or 5 inches of polyiso on top and then just some smaller bats in there maybe.
Sure.
But now, a big call out in his question here is that he said if you were building a home. So he's not talking about retrofitting an existing home. So he's got a lot more options than we're talking about here. And Energy Vanguard, which is a really good building science blog that I go to all the time, Allison Bales, he talks about in one of his articles, I'll throw a link in the notes, there's this website called ductsinside.org, and it's what is it? It's part of Earth Advantage.
I go to that site all the time.
Well, it's part of Earth Advantage, which is one of these organizations that's promoting high performance buildings. I think they certify buildings as well. I can't remember.
I've never heard of this organization.
But well, you weren't at GBA for as long as I was.
So what's it called?
So the website you want to go to is ductsinside.org.
All right, everybody. The website you want to go to is ductsinside.org.
And so what they have is they have basically checklists and CAD drawings for every possible building envelope configuration where you can get your heating to be indoors. Because the whole thing is here that you do not want any of your heating system, particularly ductwork,
in unconditioned space.
Because you're just throwing money away.
Yes. You're heating that unconditioned space.
Yeah, and think about it in the summer, air conditioning, even if you've got an insulated attic, it's still going to be hot up there. And you're going to be heating your ductwork that's trying to cool off your house. So, some of the ways are to actually build either trusses or build some sort of a structure above the ductwork so that you can get the insulation on the floor still in an attic, but above the ducts.
So you're burying the ducts basically with insulation.
Sure.
Yeah.
Or I think one of the smartest ways to do stuff like this is if you've got the room and you're building a house from scratch, is you just design walls to hide ducts. You build wider walls in certain parts of the house.
You can lower ceilings and hallways, for example.
I mean, like he says he doesn't like the look of mini splits, so I'm not sure if he's going to like the look of having soffits everywhere, which is the old school way of getting the ducts into your conditioned space. But there's
there are floor trusses that can be ordered to accommodate trunk lines and ductwork. So
sure, some people put the ductwork actually between the two floors. So if you do open web trusses, you can run you can make them any size you want. You have to have a couple extra steps to get between the two floors, but you could make deep floor systems that can hide all that ductwork, which would be ideal because then if any of it leaks, it's only leaking into your conditioned space.
So what we're saying, Eric, is it probably doesn't matter a whole bunch, but you need to keep those ducts in the conditioned space. I am a huge fan of unconditioned vented assemblies. They're very forgiving. Put the ductwork somewhere else in the main living space. Get it out of the attic.
Yeah, because
if you want to have it in the attic space and want to do that, that's fine. But move your insulation layer to the sheathing or above. I'd say above. And then there's this product called Nail Base, which is used a lot in commercial construction, and it's a layer of insulation with OSB sheathing already on top, and it saves a step of building the insulation layers and then putting the sheathing on top. Trying to find the rafters through thick foam layers is very difficult.
But my guess is that if he's talking about building a house from scratch, the amount of effort and money that's going to be put into insulating an unconditioned attic just to get the ducts in there is probably a better solution somewhere by getting the ducts into the conditioned space.
So make your ceilings higher, then further them down with ductwork in it is a solution. Yeah. And you'll have to leave an adequately sized mechanical room now for your air handler, right? That's something people forget when they, or they don't forget about it. They don't want to dedicate enough space to the mechanical systems. And, if you ever have to work on that stuff it's a drag if there's not enough room to work on all sides of the cabinet. So make your mechanical rooms big, people.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
What do you think about foam on the roof, Matt?
I kind of like it. I don't know. I mean, it really depends. And I've seen some houses where it's great because they've put really nice looking sheathing over the rafters, like boards, tongue and groove boards.
Oh, that show on the inside. Yeah, that's a cool thing you can do.
It just looks beautiful having those exposed rafters and then that, sort of decorative sheathing that also is functional.
We're talking about putting all of the insulation to the outside.
And then you're putting all the insulation on top of that. Yeah. And I like that look. So, yeah.
I do too. I've heard some, and I don't know the rules for this, but I've heard some code officials saying that those are not assemblies that are allowed. You're really not allowed to leave your framing members exposed like that.
Right, for fire reasons. Yeah.
We all know that's not what really is a problem.
That's not what happens in parts of rural New York, I can tell you.
Yeah, believe it.
And how do you go about building log cabins then?
I know. But I think the argument is that, logs take a long time to burn through, whereas, dimensional lumber can burn pretty quickly.
Yeah, but I the 3/4 inch plywood is considered fire rated. You can put that over your over your rafters or over your
On the bottom
joists on the
side.
bottom side.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about on the top if maybe the rafters in this one house that I'm thinking about were at least 2x12s. They may have been 2x14s. They were huge. It was like a 14-12 roof, I think. And so they were pretty beefy.
That'd be fun to sheathe and insulate that 14-12 roof, wouldn't it?
Mm.
Wow. Well, I hope that helps. Who was that, Eric? Eric Brown. I hope that helps, Eric Brown. All right. Now we're moving to Bemidji, Minnesota. Can we watch this video, Jeff?
Hey guys, my name is Doug. I have a quick question for you involving venting here. Let me climb down into my cellar. So down here in my cellar, as you can see, I have my mechanicals, my water softener, water heater, and my furnace. My gas furnace is vented currently up and out pretty decently. I've got some foil tape on there sealing that. Not really sure how well that foil tape is actually doing. And as you can see, it goes up and out. And the water heater vent, which is also gas, is teeing into that. Now this is where my concern is. The water heater vent currently comes up and out of the top of the water heater, but then it kind of bends down and is sloped downward before it tees into the gas vent for the furnace. And then that combined vent then goes out through an old window opening into an old window well outside, 90s up, and to a vent. So really, I'm wondering if you guys have any advice for me on what I can do here. It's going to be very difficult for me to raise this exit location because there is an obstruction. That's really where the bottom of the siding comes down. And so I'm wondering what else are my options here. Just wondering if you have any input. I really enjoy listening to you guys. Thank you so much.
Doug has a mechanical room underneath his kitchen, it looks like, right?
Yeah, it's a tight access getting down there.
And it's like a ship's ladder to access it. And down there is his furnace with his gas and his gas water heater.
And it's down pretty deep because he was talking about it going out a window well, I believe, the venting for that thing.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm.
And so both of these vent pipes for his furnace and his water heater go into a single outlet. They're combined inside the house, like near the band joist, before they go outside as one larger diameter pipe.
Yeah.
And connecting his water heater to this T is a length of flex duct as a flue pipe. And it doesn't rise up. It actually goes up a little bit and then goes back down in kind of a hump.
Yeah,
Right.
because the height of the appliance was actually higher than the flue exiting the wall. So,
yeah, it's going out through an old window that just looks like it's been plywooded over.
yeah.
So there's a lot of problems with this assembly.
Mm-hmm. And he recognizes that,
Yeah.
I think. I mean, he recognized at least that sloping down was
So a
maybe an
key
issue.
rule of flue pipes is that they always slope up, right? They want to go up, not down. You want to keep the gases out of the house, and you want to keep the moisture in the stream of air that's being exhausted, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and particularly we'll touch on this, but basically you don't want two flues joining into one inside a
So
dwelling.
I think that's problem number one, is you shouldn't do this.
Yeah,
they
so
should have their own dedicated flue.
At a minimum, his solution here needs to be to run a new hole out the wall and vent them separately.
Mm-hmm.
Also, this flex vent that is connecting his water heater to the flue pipe is not allowed. It has to be what is described as B vent, which is a double wall pipe, and this flex vent is a no-go, not allowed. So this water heater has a draft inducer motor on the top of it meant to force the gases out, and that's probably the only way this thing has been working at all, right? Because all the other things are working against it. And some of those tight style water heaters use a plastic type pipe, but this one I went and looked because his video showed what manufacturer's water heater he had, which is a Richmond. I believe it's an XR90, which I believe is a 30-gallon gas water heater. And I looked up the instructions for that, and it's supposed to use B vent, and it also says that the connector between the top of the water heater and the vent connection must rise 1/4 inch for every foot in length. So he's going to have to fix that too. And it might be a matter if he has to buy a shorter water heater, a low boy as they're described, or a mid-height water heater to get the heater low enough that he can actually have some pitch to his outlet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I'm not familiar with this. I was trying to look it up in the code, but you guys are more the code experts than I am. What if that's a non-operable window that's been filled in? Is that an acceptable way to vent an appliance from a basement?
So you can go out the building and up and terminate, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any special rules that allow you to do that or prevent you from doing that in a window well. It would be more desirable, certainly, to go up without the window well being there, be above it. But I would get a good plumber in there, or definitely read the instructions for your water heater, Doug. I found them on Menard's website, and look at those and get yourself educated on what the installation instructions are, because that's going to guide this whole assembly. There are general rules in the code, but they are superseded by the installation instructions for the particular appliance, in this case your gas water heater.
Yeah, especially nowadays, since there are so many different ways things are vented. You've got some heaters that have those concentric air intakes, and some are, something like this. These are they're atmospherically vented, right? They're not, or
this one is not. This one has a inducer motor.
Okay. Well, like you said, that's probably what's keeping them safe.
That's what's keeping this from being a CO hazard for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's still a CO hazard. It's dangerous. Mm-hmm. And the tape on the flue pipe for the furnace, I don't think that's a legit thing to do either. They do make special sealants for those connections. But once again, I'm not sure that you had the right pipe on there, so I would definitely take a double check on your installation instructions for your furnace, which you can look up online.
Yeah, he had foil tape wrapped around the duct, and that's really intended for duct work, for moving air.
Not heated flue gases. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Have you guys seen stuff like this? I totally have.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And, when we used to have houses that were super leaky, it was way less dangerous. But the tighter we make this stuff, the stakes are higher.
Yeah, I mean, of course, that's one of the big arguments for the people who are not convinced that houses should be as tight as we are making them, is, you're making the house more dangerous. But, if you do your homework and you build the things right and you vent things right, but then again, like you said, there's people out there who have installed stuff. There's probably professionals out there who have installed stuff not up to the proper standards. So, you got to, like you said, do your homework.
Yeah. And I think, even professional installers are guilty of this. I've been installing these for 20 years. I know what I'm doing. Well, stuff changes. It's not the same as it was 20 years ago.
Yep.
Yeah. Code updates, every 3 years?
Yeah.
So things have changed a lot. And,
code rules are meant to protect life and property. So, this it's not to make your life hard. It's to make people safe.
Yeah. Protect you from yourself.
Yeah.
Hey, I remember before the show you were mentioning that picture of that chainsaw guy we never brought up.
So at the magazine, we probably get more letters regarding safety issues that we photograph and then appear in the magazine, right?
And on the cover sometimes.
Yeah, we do our best to make sure that stuff doesn't happen. But
so I took the cover photo that Matt is indicating, and it shows a gentleman in a bucket lift, and he's not strapped in, but he is strapped in, sort of. Mm-hmm. He's not strapped in correctly, but so people were upset.
Yeah. Happens.
It happens.
But on that note.
So, obviously, it's easy for us to make fun or poke fun at companies who are making similar mistakes. And I happened to be on the Tractor Supply website yesterday, and I clicked on this little piece of content that said, how to work with a chainsaw. And I was like, well, I'll go for that. And so I get to this little webpage describing how to protect yourself using a chainsaw. And there's a list of things to do. Make sure you have a helmet with full coverage visor to protect your eyes and ear protection to prevent hearing loss. Never use a chainsaw without a full coverage helmet. Make sure you have thick work gloves that will help protect your hands while operating the saw. I don't know. Do you think that's true? Are work gloves going to protect you from a chainsaw?
They've got that fiber reinforcement.
Yeah, so they have to be the right thing.
Kevlar gloves, yeah.
They suggest steel-toe work boots with a built-in saw protection to protect your feet from falling objects and will reduce the extent of an injury in case the saw accidentally comes in contact with your foot while it's running.
And these are all good points.
Absolutely. You should wear protective chaps or pants and a protective jacket that can reduce injury. So the point I'm making here is the photo that they ran with this particular collection of well-intentioned instructions. So, gentlemen, who's not wearing any of this stuff, he's wearing his cowboy hat.
Is that the Marlboro Man?
He's got his consumer-grade chainsaw, and he has no gloves, chaps, or work boots. So,
But he's starting it right.
is he?
I think so. I mean, I think they recommend.
I think you're supposed to put it on the ground.
Yeah, on the ground. But I mean, they recommend putting it on the ground and putting your foot on it
Yeah.
to hold it down. And, you know, he's not like starting it in the air like, you know, the product rep did when I bought my steel. Even though, you know, he was like, you're supposed to start down here. He was like,
But
I
I'm not
do
going
this
to
all
do
the
that.
time.
Yeah, I do this all the time.
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny that you bring up this chainsaw safety thing because a few nights ago I was out with some friends and I had a big couple of big cups of coffee, and 10 o'clock at night, I could not fall asleep that night. I think I slept an entire hour the whole night. But so I fell asleep for an hour, woke back up, and I'm like, I got to do something.
I got to do some chainsawing.
I got to do something. No, I got to do something productive. And so the day before, I was looking at this big tree behind my barn that had been dropping limbs, and I was like, I really love to cut that thing down, but it's just too scary for me. So I end up on YouTube looking for videos on how to fell a large tree, and I found some good stuff. There was this Swedish logger or Swedish lumberjack channel on YouTube, had some interesting little tips. But then I found Husqvarna had this really great 45-minute detailed explanation on how to safely
Fell a tree.
drop a tree. And
There's a lot to know.
It's amazing
Yeah.
how many things. I mean, right off the bat, the one thing I didn't know is that either on the case of the saw or the handle, there's a sight line, and that's for sighting the where you're going to drop the tree. So you basically rest the butt of the saw on your knee, and then use the handle or that line to point to where you've put a stick in the ground or a marker in the ground where you want the tree to drop, and that causes the blade to cut the bevel that will hopefully get the saw to fall in the right direction.
I learned on their video too that the handle, the side handle, the front handle, is arranged so that if you hold it by the corner, it gives you the right angle of cut for the notch that makes your tree fall the right way.
Yeah.
Did you know that?
Yeah.
You did know that?
Well, no, I mean, I've learned that in the video.
I was like, wow, that's how you do that.
But it was extremely thorough, this entire video. And granted, he was taking his time because it was an instructional safety video. And of course, all these people who were on YouTube looking for stuff about logging and are like, oh, you know, yeah, he probably dropped that tree in 2050. And it's like, okay, well, the point of this video was actually for the people who aren't experienced like you to
learn,
to not hurt themselves.
Yeah,
So,
and the stakes are high there. There is no shortage of YouTube videos of people felling trees and all kinds of things, cars, houses, garages. I spent hours looking at chainsaw stuff go wrong.
Yeah, but it still did not give me enough confidence to feel like I want to cut that tree down.
The stakes are high, right? So what are you going to do?
I'm just going to leave it until.
So I find that most trees, and there are definitely exceptions, like they fall from the top down on their own pace. It's like people see a dead tree and they often like lose their mind. It's going to fall, but it's generally not how it happens.
Yeah. I'm actually just more concerned that it's in my way. I'd like to build my barn a little bit wider.
It seems like a good opportunity to rent some heavy equipment.
Yeah.
Get a come along. I'm sure you have one.
The sad thing is that if the way it's leaning, I would be able to drop it right into the woods, but our sewer commission owns an easement through my property, and about a foot under the ground in those woods is the main trunk sewer line going to our sewer treatment
What, are you
plant.
worried that the tree falling and breaking it?
I'm pretty sure it would. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
clay?
we got to try that.
I don't know what happened. The thing just came down.
Yeah. Yeah, they actually damaged the tree. Some tree guys that were hired when they put the new line in.
Okay, so I have
damaged the
solution. If you put like other logs on both sides of the line, wouldn't that bridge it and prevent it from the impact
That's
from
not a
helping?
bad idea, but I think I'm still going to
I think we just got to try this, Rob. What could happen? What could go wrong?
See, I'm kind of actually hoping that there's enough branches left on the tree that it'll soften the blow when it hits the ground, and maybe it'll just miss it all together. Yeah, but
how big is
right
it?
Through the pipe.
Oh, it's big. It's big.
How big?
At the base, it's probably about 4 feet in diameter.
Oh, that's big.
Yeah.
That's very big. Maybe you get someone else to help you with that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that was fun.
Well, don't forget, we're still in the holiday season here, and head on over to the tauntonstore.com. And one new thing we've got, we've heard mentioned that a lot of contractors like to buy their employees, buy their carpenters subscriptions to Fine Homebuilding as a Christmas gift every year, but now we've got the ability to actually buy a gift membership. So if you go to the Taunton store, we'll also put a link in the
And
notes.
there's a discount, right?
Yeah.
What is it, 20%?
20% off.
Gift 20, right? Mm-hmm. All right, so you heard it here. Gift 20. You guys have anything to add before we close out the show here?
Nope.
All set.
What's your worst chainsaw mishap?
I had a really dumb one. Just where you put the oil in, the cap. I have the hardest time getting that thing to sit right, and I thought I had it in right, and then I was reaching up to make a cut on a tree that had blown down, and it was kind of hanging. And anyway, I had the saw up kind of high and dumped oil all over myself.
Nice.
That was pretty fun.
Oh, I don't have any mishaps. I remember as a kid helping my uncle cut down a tree, and he had me on a rope ready to run, to cut it, pull it, fall in the right direction, and it worked out okay. But one tip that I really liked from that Husqvarna video was when you drop the tree and it's resting on some of the limbs on the ground and you don't know which way it's going to roll, or there's pressure on those limbs that it's resting on, you got to cut them off before you can chop it up, that you just shave little bites out of the side of the limb until it breaks under its own weight, rather than just trying to cut through it, which will bind the chain on your saw. So,
good deal.
Yeah.
I was in the process of cutting down a poplar tree at my old house when, so I put this off because my wife told me it was a bad idea. So I waited till she wasn't there.
Of course.
And so then I started cutting this thing down, and it was leaning the wrong way, right? And I cut it with the spin. You can make things kind of do some stuff. Mm-hmm. And it didn't hit the house, but it smashed an Adirondack chair to smithereens. And I look behind me, and my wife is standing there watching. And I'm like, oh, I didn't mean to do that. Yeah.
No, you say, nailed it.
Well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks to our Matt and Rob for joining me. And thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your questions at fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us wherever you're listening. It helps other folks find the podcast, and we can help them.
Yeah, it makes us feel better too.
Yeah, it's fun. Happy building.